Hello, dear friends. My name is Sofya Dorinskaya. I am a physician, director of the Center for Medical Information and the School of Mental Health. Today we will talk about vitamins. What are vitamins? Where do they come from? Today we will talk about the thesis that the doctrine of vitamins is outdated, progress moves forward. And generally speaking, in the modern world, there can't really be any diseases like avitaminosis or hypovitaminosis because there is no war. So today, we will engage in a detailed discussion regarding how true these statements actually are, whether they are grounded in objective scientific fact, and in general, we will carefully distinguish between established truths and common misconceptions. So, vitamins, the fundamental concept and the very idea behind them, about certain substances, namely vitamins. This groundbreaking idea first appeared back in 1880, when the renowned Russian physician Nikolai Ivanovich Lunin, in his doctoral dissertation at the University of Tartu, clearly demonstrated that the small mice he fed a synthetic diet with purified components of milk that were known at the time, proteins, fats, carbohydrates, and minerals died very quickly. But the mice he fed with whole milk developed perfectly well and survived. That is, little mice. And at that time, he also stated that it seemed there were some substances in milk, unknown and present in very small doses, that are necessary for the organism to survive. In 1897, on the island of Java, a Dutch physician, Eichmann, described a condition he observed in birds. And this condition was very similar to beriberi. Beriberi is a disease that was described a very long time ago. Even the Chinese described it as early as the 2nd century BC. The word comes from Malay and means weakness. So in birds, he described this weakness or some kind of mortality, and there was a clear correlation between the bird's diet. And there was a clear correlation. If rice bran was added to their feed, the birds would recover and live well. But if the rice bran was removed, the birds would develop beriberi, this weakness, and they would die. By the way, this observation led to the discovery of B vitamins. It should be said that knowledge about these substances found in food, these minimal substances present in food, and they are essential for life. This understanding really only began to enter science and medicine at the beginning of the 20th century. And it was only in the mid-20th century that this field fully developed, when doctors, scientists, and entire clinics studied these substances, observed diseases and their cures with the help of vitamins. At the beginning of the 20th century, the scientist Hopkins called these substances minimal dietary factors. At the beginning of the 20th century, the name vitamins was also proposed for such substances. The term vitamins was suggested by Funk. Now, we have come to associate these substances with the term minimal dietary factors. The name vitamins has become established for them. What are vitamins? Vita means life, and amins refers to a certain type of substance that had been discovered at that time. Now, vitamins do not belong only to amines, but this name, nutritional factors that are essential for human life, has now become established. Diseases caused by a deficiency of these nutritional factors are called hypo or avitaminosis. Vitamins are formed in nature and humans obtain them from various sources. Humans get them from plants. These are the leaves or fruits of plants. They also get them from animals, for example, vitamin C. It is produced in the bodies of many animals. Vitamin C is not produced in humans, I repeat, but in many animals it is produced. So humans obtain vitamins both from plant-based foods and from animal-based foods, if they consume the organs of these animals where vitamins accumulate. Vitamins can also exist in a precursor form. These substances are called provitamins. For example, carotene is a provitamin, a precursor to vitamin A, and it is found in carrots. Let's recall some discoveries in medicine that we use today, and perhaps some people think they have always existed. In 1628, in the year 1628, the English physician William Harvey described the circulatory system. He was the first doctor and the first person on planet Earth to describe how blood moves through the human body in his work. As you know, this discovery was associated with great danger. It was forbidden. The church prohibited the dissection of corpses, and doctors were not allowed to study anatomy. Of course, they studied it, but this was associated, well, in fact, with the threat of even losing their lives, because this was punishable by death. Since the year 1628, the fundamental nature of the human circulatory system has not changed at all. Just as it was originally described by the physician William Harvey in 1628, so it has remained throughout the centuries, with the heart and vessels functioning in the exact same way today. Humans still have a 4-chambered heart. It has not turned into a 3-chambered heart. Humans still have an aorta. And the normal structure of the circulatory system, like everything else, has remained unchanged. If there are developmental defects, for example, if the aorta connects with some other vessel, or if the heart valves do not close completely, these are defects and they cause diseases, and these diseases have been described. Diseases that have been described and for which the causes have been identified, such as deficiencies of certain nutrients, these have existed on Earth since the appearance of humans. People are aware of them, They are counted from the moment they were described, noticed, and identified as distinct diseases. For example, pellagra was recognized specifically as a disease, with groups of people, and its symptoms were described. It was described in the 17th century. Scurvy, specifically as a disease, a certain condition. It was described in the 13th century. With the development of seafaring, scurvy began simply killing people. Doctors estimated that from 1600 to 1800, several million sailors died. That's more than the number of sailors who died in all naval battles of that time. It's a specific disease. Doctors searched for when the disease was described, for similar principles, for clinical patterns. Among groups of people, this was a consistent observation. Doctors, of course, grouped this into a single pathology, described it, added to the observations, continued to observe, and so on. And naturally, doctors searched for the cause of these diseases. For example, with pellagra, just like with any other disease, there were many theories. There was a bacterial theory in the Middle Ages. There was a genetic theory. If you think that the genetic theory, like nowadays when everything is about genes, is a trend of modern times, that's not the case at all. It existed in the 18th, 16th, and 19th centuries as well. The genetic theory of diseases, which as it later turned out, are caused by deficiencies, specific deficiencies of nutritional factors, did exist. Why? Because, for example, they observe a family and all of them have the same clinical symptoms. Essentially, it's the same disease, so what kind of illness is this? Of course, it's simply considered a genetic disease, but they all eat the same way. It's one family. Or, for example, pellagra was described in Italy, where the climate is the same everywhere. Everyone has roughly the same diet, you see, and it took tremendous effort. A lot of intelligence was devoted to this. Undoubtedly, millions of human lives were lost. People died because doctors did not know the cause of these conditions. And only after Lunin's dissertation did progress begin. This was in 1880 and onwards, when these minimal nutritional factors in food were isolated and identified, when they began to be extracted, when they started to be produced in laboratories, when doctors realized that most likely this was the cause, and began to treat pellagra, beriberi, and people started to recover. This is the greatest A discovery comparable to the invention of the wheel, I don't know, comparable to Newton's discovery of the law of universal gravitation, the fact that Newton discovered it in the 17th century. Even airplanes still fly today thanks to the fact that this law was described. This knowledge hasn't gone anywhere and will never disappear for all eternity. Well, knowledge can disappear, right? But the fact that deficiencies of certain nutrients in humans cause diseases will never go away. That's true. The claim that nowadays, since there is no war, there can't be any vitamin deficiencies or hypovitaminosis is absolutely unfounded. Because it's no secret, and many people talk about it, that the soil is being depleted nowadays. And plants, as well as naturally raised animals that eat these plants, contain less and less of them. Those very vitamins that are necessary for a person to be healthy and not get sick. In other words, we are experiencing a natural depletion of soils. When doctors began to investigate and the cause of the diseases became clear, scurvy, pellagra, beriberi, vitamin deficiencies, and so on began to be discovered and identified through careful observation. These were very insightful and intelligent people who described all of this. The ways in which hypo and avitaminosis develop, these diseases, these nutritional deficiencies, and the alimentary route, that is a deficiency in food, is just one of many ways a person can develop hypo or avitaminosis. A person may live a life in which, in principle, the substances contained in food are not sufficient for them, even if they eat the same food as someone who does not experience the same stresses or tension, the psychophysical stresses that another person experiences. People have different lives. People get sick, and illnesses themselves can lead to vitamin deficiencies, for example, inflammatory diseases. They themselves directly lead to vitamin deficiencies. There are also congenital vitamin deficiencies. When the mother, if she was not eating enough, her body lacks nutrients and her eating habits, there is a deficiency, and from the very beginning her child is born already with vitamin deficiencies, the child already has a problem. The thesis that there is no war now is, in principle, untenable, because modern society, even outside of military conflict, it somehow manages almost magically to create a wartime situation for itself, at the very least a situation of hunger. Yes, the economic situation is indeed difficult, and many people are actually hungry. They cannot afford to buy enough food. But there are people who can afford to buy enough food. But their ideas about what proper nutrition is are so... they do not correspond to reality, to put it mildly, yes, so they deliberately eat as if they were in a concentration camp. Deliberately themselves. And therefore these things have not disappeared from our lives. Not a single reason why a person develops hypo or avitaminosis has gone away. Hypo or avitaminosis, one or another, can simply occur because a person lives in a certain area. And to find a place on the planet Earth, a place where a person would not be affected by such a huge number of physical phenomena, like, for example, very bright sunlight or extreme cold, and all plants, all animals, and all marine life would be around them. Some animals where their diet would include everything the body needs. I don't know of any such places, but maybe if one does exist on planet Earth, then... But there are so few of them that not everyone could fit there, and they still need to be found. It's not the seashore, because there's too much sun there. It's not very far from the sea either, because there's little sun, little iodine, and few of those marine animals, and so on and so forth. You see, we live on this planet in all sorts of different places. We all have absolutely... Every single person has their own unique living conditions, their own specific stresses in daily life, and their own particular eating habits. But the human body always needs exactly what it needs. It requires those nutrients in exactly the precise amount it needs right now at this very moment. And it also needs to store some for later. And if you don't fully understand and know this, then developing a hypo or a vitaminosis is actually quite easy. So all the talk that the study of hypo and avitaminosis is outdated, or that all these discoveries are obsolete, is like saying that the circulatory system described by William Harvey is outdated information. As if we suddenly have a different kind of heart now. Or for example, to say that as if the law of universal gravitation has somehow become outdated. After all, how long has it been now? It's already been 400 years or so. Yes, 400 years since Newton described it. Well, then let's rediscover it all over again. This knowledge is priceless. This knowledge was paid for. I don't think it was paid for with millions. I think it was paid for with hundreds of millions of human lives, who, throughout the entire history of humanity, died from these diseases, and no one knew what caused them. That's why an accurate understanding, a correct understanding of what a person needs, what diseases develop, and what paths a disease can take is so important. And then this knowledge will never disappear. In our School of Mental Health, when we train our specialists, these are, without a doubt, the very first things people study. This is where it all begins. After that, we move on to teaching. The next levels, the specialist level, because there are many nuances. But without this knowledge, people won't get very far. They will never become healthy. If this knowledge is discarded, that is precisely why it must be preserved, it must be cherished, it must be known, it must be applied, and it should be inscribed as a golden page in medicine, not just as a part of medical history to be forgotten, but as something that should form the very foundation of medical teaching. Well, if we want to live long, healthy lives, to have plenty of strength, not to lose our minds at the end of life, and in general to remain people who are capable, who think, who achieve their goals, and whose lives are happy and free from pain. This was Sofya Dorinskaya with you. All the best. Goodbye.